diversity in many fields. And he's applied this throughout the defense sector, the intelligence sector, all of government. A very complete bio we put here. But Paul's going to go and tell us point blank, very accurately, what he and colleagues who occupy that corner office expect relative to performance delivery. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Paul.
Thank you very much. I'd like to be here. I want to be Bob, I think, because having been by coastal Rhode Island and Monterey, that's really quite a combination. So perhaps I'll go up to the front so I can get a little better angle on the crowd here. I have some slides, so I'll just use them as notes for tonight. But it's really my pleasure to be here today. And you're going to switch those over for me? Thank you. I've been doing this a little while, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the first thing I'd like to do is I'm just going to give you a little bit about PPC commercial, because I'm here tonight, and then I'll talk a little bit about my background and sort of how I started in the trenches with probably some of you that may still be in the trenches. And then you know, move my way up through management and eventually be part of the board of directors. So it's my pleasure. Actually, Paul Myers twisted my arm to give this presentation, and my thanks to him. The topic was his idea, and I went along for the ride. So it's really executive view of quality, and there's different views from different kinds of executives. So I'll just mention that. A little bit about PPC. We've been around 25 years. We're headquartered here in McLean. We have a western office at right next outside of Sandia National Labs, and we do a lot of work for DOE and work in the energy space, which I'll talk about in just a minute. We have about 35% of our people are advanced degrees, about 50% are cleared, probably like many of you. So with that, just a little bit, that's me without glasses. But one of the things we were talking about over dinner is something that I think we could all relate to, is it's really important to deliver quality and always deliver, in particular for our federal customers. By show of hands, how many people are related to the federal market as opposed to other?
Including contractors.
Yeah, absolutely. So I figured as much, and we're talking about over dinner. I mean, what's really important is the missions that we serve across government, and there's so many different ones. Some of them are, supporting our war fighters. Others may be, ensuring public health, making sure our banking systems are safe, whatever it might be. There are many different missions, and they're all very, very important. And I think that's what sets us apart in the federal space from maybe some other industries, and it's something that drives us each and every day. And quality becomes really important because, if you make mistakes, you can end up on the front page of the Washington Post, and we all know what that's like. So a little bit about us. We're really into technology solutions, and we deliver in these key markets, which I've sort of touched on a little bit. And we're only a mid-sized company. We have some credentials. We're CMMI level 3, and we have ISO 20000 and also ISO 9001. We should have ISO 27000 in July, so just about a month away. We're in stage 2 for that, so that's something that we're looking forward to. Now, I would say that a lot of executives, having these logos here are important. That's important for us, and it's important to the companies because we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But having those is not just an ego thing. It's important for business, and it's important that you put your stake in the ground. You say you're going to live by the principles that come out of these kinds of standards, and so that's important for us, and we'll go into that a little bit more. So finally, just moving forward, so we're all on common ground. These are the services we do. We work in energy and management and environmental consulting. We do a lot of software development. About 44% of all of our work is in systems development work. We support cybersecurity, and we do large records management systems. One of the things we do is for NARA. So we were talking about treasures of the United States government. We actually work for NARA, and they take care of all of our national treasures. So kind of an interesting little tidbit about PPC. And I don't want to bore you with too many more details, so we'll move on. For the purposes of this discussion, there's a couple things I want to just mention. So I'm just going to give you a quality perspective from an executive viewpoint, and these are views from the top that I've seen in various organizations over the years, and it's really based on my own personal experience. So there's a lot of my own viewpoints in here. I'm not probably like all executives, and I'm sure there's differences amongst us, but it is based on my opinions and what I've seen, and I could give you specific examples. The goal is to be provocative. I hope that we can get into a discussion and we could bounce some ideas around, and maybe you could challenge some of the things I'm going to say. And that would be what I would consider a success, if we could have a nice interactive discussion. During the discussion, I'll use the words quality management, quality assurance, quality control, and I may use those interchangeably, and I may just refer to them as quality in general. They are obviously different disciplines and are interrelated, but I may just use them as a course of action, just to sort of generalize. I'm not going to really talk much about process improvement per se, because we could do a whole thing just on process improvement. So I sort of not going to really get into too much of that. And the idea is to hopefully let's have some fun with this. And I've got my Kevlar on, so feel free to come and get me. With that, let's get into it. So a little bit about me. So I have about 30 years of experience. I've survived 30 years, multiple external and internal appraisals of various systems on different specs. I've also been an executive sponsor a number of times, and I've taken an organization. I've done level 2s and 3s and research in CMMI, and I took pragmatics all the way to CMMI level 5, which was quite a chore, and even got into it a little bit with SEI on that one. So I've got a lot of history there. The organizations that I work with range from small businesses of 25, a group of 25, all the way up to 1,000 people. So there's different challenges depending on the size of the organization, and so we can talk about some of that. Most of the work that I did was with homegrown tools, so probably you can all relate with that. And though I've worked with Process Max, or obviously you need scheduling tools or EVM tools sometimes that you can use. A lot of tools were done using spreadsheets, Excel and what came before Excel. When the PCs first were out in the 80s, I go back that far. So we've done a lot, but a lot was homegrown. We designed and developed a lot of the systems and the implementation against the specs, probably like you all have, and so I've been through all that. Some of the systems that I worked on, I don't know how many people remember Zero Defects. Lockheed was big on that. That was a big deal back. I guess that was the early to mid 80s. There was a wave of things that happened with TQM. If you remember, probably quite a few people remember that. And that was, I always found TQM to be really neat, because it was about getting a communication going across an organization and then trying to present the data so that everybody was on the same page, even across maybe supplier bases. But all the way through mill standards, back when we really did it right, in my opinion, in many ways, because we really designed and systems engineered things, and then we built the software, and we did a real waterfall, which is very different than today's world, which is, let's build it quickly and get the users involved. And I think there's pluses and minuses in both systems, so it's kind of interesting. All the way through some of the other specs, and even noticed our friend Greg, the master black belt down there. I don't know how many other black belts do we have. Or great, so quite a few. That's good. I'm not one, but I've done some work in this area. And one of the cool things was combining Lean with Six Sigma, and then also with theory of constraints, which is another topical area which you're probably much more versed in than I am. But that was some really neat work that we provided. The Army was a big consumer of Six Sigma in particular during that time. So now why we're really here is to talk about sort of answering this question. And so what does the CEO and the board of directors want from QA, from quality? And the first thing I'm just going to say as a sort of a reminder is that businesses exist to provide needed products and services with the aim to make money. Profit is important. Generally speaking, the board and the executives are happy if you make more money, right? So, making money is good, making more money is better in many ways, and that's usually the metric by which executives exist. And you've probably been through this, where you want to talk about engineering metrics, and the executives want to keep coming back to P&L kind of statements and looking at it very much from a financial profit and loss kind of criteria. And so you have to respect that, because that's important, and that's why businesses exist, at least for-profit businesses. Given that above, and if you follow me for a minute, a lot of executives then see the quality assurance and quality in general as a necessary business expense. And so the challenge then is to sort of figure out where's the real value from quality derived. And for executives, they tend to be a fairly smart bunch, and they're business savvy, and their job is to figure out how to make it all work and grow. They really, you really need to get down to evidence, and one of the things they'll want to look at in general is return on investment, and understand if I give you this much money for my quality programs, what am I going to get back, right? Am I going to get a checkbox on ISO 9001? And they'll think differently, and so as quality assurance professionals. And I've been in your shoes before. Like I said, I started in the trenches. You have to support the decision making, and you have to influence the executives with hard data. And it's hard because there's usually not a direct. It's hard to separate out the costs and return on investment in many cases, because many executives will do it very qualitatively. They'll sort of have a gut feel. They'll think about how much they're spending in indirect labor and the tools and the software licenses that they provide, and they'll want to just sort of get a gut feel. So the more that we quantify, for me, if it's quantified for me, the better off I'm going to be, and I want to know that it's connected to efficiencies or productivity, and that I'm benefiting in some ways in the business that I'm conducting. So that's generally how executives look at it. I don't think there's anything that I'm saying is foreign to anybody, but there's a certain amount of it that I've sort of set the table on that I'm going to talk about. And so how do we be successful, right? So I think the key, I have a couple slides on this, but the key is to really, again, lay out, strongly couple the quality programs, the things that you're doing, whether it's software quality or it's for a widget, whatever it might be, tie that to how it improves the business. So I think that that's what the standards usually tell us to do, right? It says, what are your business goals, and then you try to tie it to your business goals. A lot of people skip that step, and they just start going right into quality without tying it back to the business, and every business is different. So I think it's important that we educate executives like me, and that we get the fact that it's part of the business, and it's going to help our business be stronger and better, and be able to compete better. So I think the more you can demonstrate and show that, and how it's connected to your action plans and everything else, the better off you'll be. There's two things that I think executives are most interested in. The first one is customer satisfaction. So customer satisfaction is a key, and I just listed a few metrics out there: mean time to failure, mean time before repair, problem resolution rates, software defect rates. There's a zillion things. You guys are much better at that stuff than I am. I've certainly dabbled in some of them. But the point is that if we prove that these things are good and that we're delivering, and the customer respects those defect rates or whatever they might be, and you can show that those are better than over time, or better than a benchmark, then you're always you're going to generally be successful. So There are many different attributes of that, but customer satisfaction is important. Why is it important? Because particularly in the federal business right now, recompete win rates are way down. We're not, the rate used to be north of 85%. You won your recompetes. These days it's down around, some people say it's down closer to 50. I think that's probably a little low. I've heard rumors of some of the big companies getting down well below 50 on their recompete win rates. So the more you can tie it to that and then tie it to the next one, which is follow-on and new business win rates, then I think that's where quality is really going to be successful from an executive viewpoint. We want to know, are we taking care of our customers and are we growing our business? Or are we holding on to the business that we have? In an environment like we have today, you have to hold on to your business because you can't grow unless you hold on to what you already have. So, so these are really important, and it's important to show that. I think the other thing that consumes us in all businesses is doing proposals. So I always find it interesting when I'm on a red team review and I'm looking at a proposal and I look at a tech approach, and the tech approach, let's say, is for a quality assurance. We have to write a quality assurance plan, and I read it, and there's not the sort of how you do it. It's what you do, which is really not what's important. It's how you do it, and then to give evidence of the benefits that you would derive from our particular approach to doing it, and those are the things that really get people's attention, because proposals is how you grow your business. And so it's really important that we have the quality aspects built in, because we have strong processes and procedures for doing the business we're doing that we're supposed to be good at to begin with. That said, people are trying to do a lot of different things, so they get sometimes a little fuzzy in different areas, and it's important to to have that easy to quantify and easy to reproduce, so that we can do proposals more effectively, so that when we get a new award, that we could take these lessons learned and those artifacts and quickly move them over. And that's what the quality book says to do, right? The executives, they don't get down into those levels of detail. They just expect that it's going to be successful. And so it's important that we're able to communicate those things and then bring them evidence of that going forward. So I think the next topic is a little bit about culture. Executives worry a lot about culture. What's the culture of the organization? So it's important that, I had a boss that once said, who's at business development? And everybody would look around, but the answer is we're all in business development, right? And I think for the same reason, you could say we're all in quality, right? It's the same situation. So you have to drive a culture that everybody feels that they're a part of the quality. And if you can do that, then I think you have a better chance of success in having a strong quality program to provide good quality in the services and products you deliver. And I think it's you got to convince them that it's not a destination, that it's a journey that just keeps going on and on and on. And again, a lot of executives see it as, I want to check a box, I want to win an RFP, that's the way it's viewed. So it's important that we continue to try to have that dialogue about that. And we'll get that going in a minute. I can see Bob chomping at the bit, which is good. So I think the way you do that is through some really strong metrics, and those metrics have to show benefits to the business. That's why we tie them back, and that's why we have to show that that we can do that. There's many different techniques for doing that. Back to TQM for a minute. One of the things I admire is it was a communication path. We would post up the charts. People got to see their part in the overall quality of a program. I thought that was powerful. Agile development uses those techniques with burn down charts. We used to do software estimating through the developers would all do points. We use a point system for Agile, and then we'd rate them and we'd look at how they did historically, and then we knew that Bob was 1.1 times his estimate, and Jimmy was 0.6. So you got to know and correct on your estimating, and sometimes from those things. So there's different techniques. I think you're all very aware of those, but demonstrating it, keeping it simple for the executives like me, that's important. And then finally, just to remember that an executive always looks at it as a cost. So costs are derived and then programs are derived from people, process, and tools. And what's interesting is in the services business, which I've always been involved in, usually you have lots of people and you can figure out how to get a little extra time out of people, maybe to participate in a quality program or be an ATM on an appraisal or what have you, maybe perform some PPQA on your projects. The fact is, though, is that it's all about getting those processes documented, using the people. But what I found is that tools are usually a harder sell for a lot of the smaller companies because they don't want to pay those non-recurring software licenses. So it's interesting. Like I said, a lot of it was done with homegrown because they wouldn't pay the tool cost, but they'd be happy to figure out how to get an extra hour out of Carol or Donna or other people. So anyway, for me, is the key success driver is look at the investment and drive that home, and look at the people, process, and tools, and make sure that you're telling a story up to the decision makers. So hopefully that was a little bit of information to sort of get things going here, and just open it up for some discussion. I don't think I said anything that you didn't already know. I don't have any sort of big ideas around it, except that executives are people many times like me that actually used to work down in the project area, was a project manager, maybe was an engineer at one point in time, and respects the ideas of quality, but we're always going to look at those cost trade-offs and how we can do things efficiently and effectively. So, yeah.
We're looking at trying to convince the C-level of the value of things. How much do monetization of cost avoidances actually figure in, or are they too squishy to be of much impact?
So, it's funny, cost avoidance is I think it's a great statistic, and I think it's important to quantify those things because they'll pay attention to that as well. It's interesting that you're probably much better at this stuff than I am, but cost avoidance is a really good metric. It may not be as powerful as other cost statistics, but it's one that you have to pay attention to. So I believe that executives would listen to that, and I think you just have to tell the story in a way that it makes sense. And there's a lot of games you can play with cost avoidance as an example. Cost benefit's another one. I was thinking of a time when we were doing a systems engineering trade study, and a long time ago, and we were trying to figure out how much is the payload data on a satellite worth. Let's just say it's a Department of Defense satellite. How much is the payload data worth on that satellite? That's a hard thing to quantify. So we thought about it a while, and what we thought about was, well, let's see, it cost $300 million to put that satellite up there, so it's worth at least $300 million, right? But I mean, when you start going through these ideas of how valuable it is, you start looking at the program cost, the value of intelligence information, perhaps, you start getting into some really interesting discussions. I think cost avoidance is a similar discussion to that, and I think it's an important one.
I'm shaking my head here and I'm saying yes, 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 yes. I've worked during the past 10 years. I've worked for 4 different companies that range inside from fewer to 100 people to over 10,000 people. And I can say that my belief is that in every case, the senior executives viewed it as, let me get the certification or whatever, and once I got that, I got the certificate on the wall. That's good enough. I don't need to worry with it. Now, how can I minimize the expense of it? And I don't care. And the whole idea of improvement, or the whole idea of that, what are the opportunities that were missed because you didn't have it, or that has been, relatively unimportant. The other problem is that because of that attitude, that the people who are doing the work, in many cases, and in some cases even some of the senior management, felt a minimum amount of need to follow processes that are well documented, for example. And so it's all fine and well and if then you say, well, we need some metrics to show how this is improved, well, it's fine because they don't have anything that you can use from before they had the processes. And once they have the processes, if they're not following, what is it really? It doesn't really mean anything. So, it's like the first problem is getting the senior management, the executives, to recognize that it's not just a destination, that it is a continuing journey. And I've struggled with this, as I said, for at least the last 10 years, with limited success. So from the point of it, from the viewpoint of an executive, how do you convince the executives that it's more than the certificate on the wall?
I'll tell you a technique I've used. They really get uptight and they really listen better, and they get the content in their ears when they start having threats to their current programs, right? Customers are being dissatisfied, or there's more risk in their portfolio. So I think one of the techniques that you can use, particularly in an operational sense, is that there's risks that are, as you go through your PMRs, you're seeing the colors go from green to yellow to red, and usually it could be related to people or not following process. And I think that data needs to be available to the executives. And I think once they feel that there's risk and that they're going to become their own rear ends are at risk, then I think sometimes that'll get their attention. So I think that's a good technique. You have to be careful how you use that, but I think it's important to use data to tell that story. So, and we were talking about the federal government and the contractor community and how in some cases we work as great teams together, in some cases we don't. And I've always felt, it's really important when a project manager would come to me and they'd say, that the government is overworking us. We got more work than we signed up for. It's out of scope. And all these other issues that come up. One of the things I said is, well, have you captured the data, the metrics by which you're performing it against, so that we can show that we said we were going to do X, but we're really doing 2 times X now. And so without getting that data, it's the same argument. You got to have that baseline of information so that you can get to that next level. And I think once there's a threat, there's a risk, or there's this true large benefit that they can perceive, then I think you're going to get their attention. And benefits are, executives are always going to be a little bit skeptical when someone comes in and says, if you buy this thing and we do this, it's going to cost 70% less, and it's going to be, we're going to get there 10 times quicker, or whatever it might be. They're going to be skeptical, and that's what they do, right? That's what we do. We have to be, because frankly, there's a lot of people trying to convince you to do different things, and they're trying to decide among a lot of alternatives on how to take precious few dollars and get them to make that company or organization stronger. So they're also going through their own analysis of alternatives. And I think the more you can do that, yeah.
I'd like to comment on the cost avoidance. As a master black belt, I love things to be expressed in dollars, because dollars is the sine qua non expression of value that everybody gets. But what's happened in certainly the last 5 years especially, is as budgets have shrunk and margins have shrunk, it's no longer just about booking sales, profit, and cash. This cost avoidance stuff that previously nobody wanted to pay attention to, today means the difference between being able to accomplish the mission on a lower budget, on a cut budget, and not, and complete failure. So a lot of these things that don't generate margin or cash or profit, nevertheless mean we can perform the same work and maintain the same quality level at a lower budget, at a lower burn rate, and that is cost avoidance.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's a great point. I think unfortunately, and this is my own opinion, I agree with you. I think the world has been financially engineered to death, right? Mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot of people that are they come from a financial background. They're trying to figure out how to squeeze every ounce out of something. And there's a limit to how far you can squeeze something down and be successful. So you're right. You have executives are trying to find ways so that we can make something repeatable, and we can find innovation so that we can build it once and use it many times or what have you. So I mean those are appealing ideas, and I think again, if you can support that with data, I think that's going to be a strong driver to get where you want to be. There are going to be executives, to Bob's point, that just will never get there. And I think the beauty is, we have a choice. We try. You can fall on your sword, but sometimes you just got to find the right leadership. And the leaders that you want are the people that believe in the value of quality and how it's important. Particularly if you're same time the budgets are tight, you're trying to grade up your workforce because you're going into your next recompete or whatever. There are all these challenges. They're looking for the tools to strengthen, and a lot of times that exists just in having good process, good artifacts, reusable, and the data to support your arguments that you put into your proposals, so that you know that when you go bid something and they're cutting it down to the slimmest margin they can, and it's firm fixed price, that they know they can still be, they're going to be successful, right? So it's funny when we talked to the government several years ago, before the latest low-cost craze, we used to say, cost reimbursable contracts are the place where we make the least amount of money, right? The risk is supposed to be on us, but we actually make the least amount of money because the fee was usually set as a fixed fee. It turns out that T&M and fixed price contracts were the ones where the contractors made the most money, because we put in enough management reserve and risk and build it into the price in order to make sure that, and if it was something we did before, that was great, but the government always felt good that, if it's fixed price, they're like, okay, yeah, here you go. And it's interesting how it's changed, because there was a lot more cost reimbursable contracts. We were developing some really high-end stuff, and it's interesting how the world has changed. I don't think it's changed for the better. I think this latest era we've been in for about, since the recession, the Great Recession, has been terrible. It's been terrible for the business, and I think you'd all agree. I think the world's gone mad in many ways. We're buying mission-critical items for the lowest price technically acceptable. And I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but I'll just tell you a little story about that. So and it started, a place I know for a fact is Veterans Affairs. So they're trying to take care of our veterans, right? How many people are veterans? Right, several, right? So the Veterans Affairs, and so they were asking for some really high-end services, software development, and what have you, and they were doing it in an LPTA environment. And so the way they did it is the contract officer would come in and they'd have 5 proposals, or 10, and they'd set them down on their desk, and they'd go take the top one off the pile, and they were ordered from lowest to highest cost, and they would walk into the technical team and say, review this one and tell me if it's acceptable. And if it was acceptable, they wouldn't even look at any of the other ones. That was it. Stop right there. That's the winner. That's how they were doing it. So the world is a funny place, and we have to figure out how to derive best value. So it's interesting to see the Secretary of Defense come out with a recent memo. I believe it came out in March. Talked about the use of best value and low price, and it's really a breath of fresh air to see us starting to go back to, I would say, more normalcy in our business. Great points.
Yeah, I would quickly agree with that. The weakness I always had with First Consumer was quality was not allowed access to the cost screens in any of the companies I worked. So I learned to quickly make friends with the cost accounts. And what I did was, when I was trying to figure out where best to put my efforts, I would be assigned particular product lines. And what I would do is I look to see where they were losing the most money, where was the gross margins, the thinnest, who's feeling pain, who got in trouble with the government, got shut down. So I basically looked at who had the most fear and who had the most loss. costs.
Right.
And then I'd go in there and baseline and figure out why they were losing money, where it was going, and then suddenly they would, then that would initially be more fear resistant. But once I could do that, now I have my data, and then I would start doing the design experiments. So, I did a lot of those, and we would take costs down. What I found out they were doing was, if their rejection rate was 50%, which I had a process that was like that, you wouldn't know that. The rejection rate was 0, because what they did is they doubled the amount of materials, and they increased the amount of time. So that was their idea of hiding the true cost. Meanwhile, the marketing manager numbers wise, gross margins are approaching 0. So that was, and then they got shut down when they failed testing, and the government inspector shut them down. So now I had them where I wanted them. So I basically came in and did my first DOE, and I proved that the communication client manager had had driven costs down to the point where he was literally making garbage. He had literally choked the ability to make useful product because he was.
I would get an executive's attention.
Well, what I did was I did my first experiment, and I proved that by saving money on the water cooling system, we made up scrap because we can control temperature. So suddenly I did that, and we got the money to finish the cooling system, and then I just kept going. And after the end of the year, we found that we had removed about $150,000 of cost, but that meant the gross margin went from 0 to significantly higher. Right. And the guys, the marketing manager, had raised the price, and now I got to promote that. And then Six Sigma came out, and I was relieved to find that I now could just call it what I was doing that. Right. I've worked under so many acronyms, and I've done the same things. I really don't care what I'll use any acronym, but it's based on the last 100 years of solid tools, so especially statistical tools and the things that there's legal blocks in government. I just went through SAM training. They're using it, systems engineering. Of course, he's using a lot of industry name them. But the things that work are always working, and everyone's stealing them and giving them different acronyms.
I'm just curious. So, I think your key point was that engineering data needs to be tied with cost data, and usually cost account managers or whoever's involved. Sometimes it's the PM, but I just wonder how many people have had that same challenge with sort of engineering data without cost data. Maybe it doesn't happen all the time, but I agree that we regard our financial information maybe too closely, but there's ways you can share that at a level that allows for the collaboration to occur in the right manner. And I think that's a big part of maybe the quiver of arrows that you can use to help convince the right outcome. So great point there. Other points. It's interesting. One of the best projects I ever worked on was I was working as a subcontractor to Lockheed Martin, and it was for the large SBIRS program, space-based infrared system, huge constellation of satellites, many billions of dollars. And what we did is we built. It was back in 1997. Or 6 maybe, and the web was very new. HTML was new. We were just starting to scratch the surface with hypertext links and such. And what we were able to do with this project that we did for Lockheed was we integrated their cost accounting system with their deliverable database. With their schedule mainframe computer at the time, and then we tied it all together so that anybody that was part of the integrated process team in an IPPD environment could actually see all those necessary elements, and we tied it all together, and that was presented to the Air Force as well, but the team was able to see that data. And it was right there because we could link all that stuff together and integrate it through basic integration, flat file integration, or database calls, or whatever. And I think it's fascinating that we did it so long ago, and we were able to, and still today, I think we've lost a lot of that art that we used to do back in the days when program management was strong, and how we tied all that stuff together from engineering to cost was so so well done. We had our cost packages, we had our cost account managers, we had the engineers working in the integrated process teams, process and product teams, and it all came together. And I think we've lost a little bit. And that's why I'm sort of you know, reminiscing a little bit about back to mill standards. Kind of comes from that era. Yeah. Great.
Just to add to that point, that was back in a day where people would talk face to face, not send the email message, not send the text. And do we need to go back to face conversations to really understand what the mission is and how to best support it?
That's a great point. I'll tell you, I'm a little bit new school, I'm a little bit old school. And so one of the things that people don't like about me is, when I'm the ogre, is because I actually believe that face-to-face collaboration is the strongest collaboration. And even Skype or some other system can do the same thing that you get from this direct interaction and being able to watch body language and eye contact and all the other things that goes on. And I think we've lost it, you know? I think you're right, Greg. So I encourage, and I walk the halls. I go around, I'm usually the guy that turns on the lights in the morning, makes coffee, and I'm usually the guy that turns the lights off at night. And I observe, and I want to see people working together. You know, and it's a little bit old school, right? There are collaborative environments now, GitHubs, and all kinds of different techniques for doing that. With you know, you can use wikis to help with lessons learned. That's been around for a while. But there's a lot of different techniques. At the same time, I think we have lost a little bit. And maybe part of management 101 needs to be the right amount of interaction and how we do it. So that's a good thought. Other comments? Points? Any disagreements? Oh, yeah.
On the other hand, to take the devil's advocate, I started out working in waterfall development, and I wound up doing spiral development. And today, Agile and Scrum. And to me, I get Agile perfectly because it's basically critical chain program management applied to software development and system development. So it's grounded on some hard science. And you can always get up and walk around. In fact, if you look at the books that have Scrum lessons learned, that's their #1 lesson. Get the developers together to actually talk to each other in meet space, right? Which is for some of them a new experience. But that's easy. That's much easier than taking this archaic paradigm, software development paradigm, which frankly never really worked all that well.
There's a couple of 2 points I'm going to say. So I was involved in building out an agile development environment, extreme programming even. And what we did is we took all the cube walls away, we made them down here, we set up pair programming. So we had, whenever one guy was actually coding, the other guy was watching, and then they would change places. We were doing sticky notes for stories and trying to create our sprints and such. We did continuous integration, and we were doing test-driven development, which was you built your test code before you built your source code, right? So these are some really cool techniques. The one problem with Agile, as I see it, is Agile on the sort of the top of the Agile or interactive software development, iterative development, is you have to involve users, right? That's the key factor, right? So we used to set up an extranet environment. We put the code out there for, part of maybe a couple sprints, and then they would have to give you feedback. Well, we know in this environment right now, it's really hard to get the users to engage at the level that's necessary, sometimes in Agile development. So what happens is you start missing milestones because you're not getting that user feedback that you need and that collaboration. So it's a great point, is how do we create, I agree with you that Agile has a lot of benefits and is better than waterfall in so many ways. The point is, though, is we've got to get those users involved, and so we have to educate them to know that their part is greater than they may think it is, because usually they're going to, try to maybe not be as involved as they should be. So I don't know if you have ideas around that.
You have to be realistic.
Yeah.
I mean, they're your customers, so they can do what they can do. I mean, you have to have realistic expectations,
Right.
and a lot of times you have to help them because they don't. If they knew the answer, they wouldn't need you. They would just do it themselves.
Right.
So customers serve a very, very valuable role, and they have their own innate customer wisdom. But you have to go the rest of the way between where the customer will go and what's needed to knock it out of the park.
Right.
You have to go the rest of the way.
I agree with you completely. It was sort of to try to stimulate the discussion because I think customers forget that, and a lot of times in waterfall the reason why it would fail is they thought they knew what they wanted, but then when they got it they didn't want it. That wasn't what I really wanted.
The requirements have
Yeah,
changed.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the beauties of as they see it, they get to say, well, that's, I wanted a little bit, green instead of yellow, and so that's the beauty of it. And as long as you get that involvement at some level, and there's degrees, and I think you're right. I think it's up to the software development professionals and the sort of the systems engineers to sort of take it the rest of the way. But I find they're doing agile development sometimes in a fixed price environment, and they're not doing their end, which is putting a lot of risk then back on something that probably shouldn't have been fixed price to begin with. So there's some of that goes on as well. Yeah.
One idea to get the user to help themselves and read more than they think they can is I'm going to steal some ideas from product development and hardware. One of the things we used to do, I was making parts for firefighters, and we decided we wanted to make a global mass market of everything. It's gone scuba diving, we've used one of these. So they had this myth of the global firefighter. That guy doesn't exist. Anybody get more than 65%. Because the laws of physics, Germany's are mutually exclusive with North America's. So you would have things like that. But what we would do is when we would get to a certain point where we would have to commit money, and we didn't know if our design approach was going to work, we would set up alpha tests with the actual firefighters. I would design a form, like the light skill surveys to extract answers that I needed to make decisions and changes. But you have to basically have to set it up. You have to create an artificial environment based on what the customer has told you they think they need. Create that, put them in that. So in this case, we had a working prototype. We put it on the firefighter, and have him do his calisthenics, have him breathe, and then when it was all fogged up, I showed him the feature we innovated that it was like a windshield blast of air. We had a thing that nobody else had, and suddenly everything cleared. Now, he didn't know about that feature until we did that, and I wouldn't tell him until I clogged up. But that was critical. Does the user care? You can see how you can do this. You can set up scenarios and set up like a simulation for your customer to get your decision points. You also have to design it and make it so they can do the simulation in maybe 30 minutes. You can do this. You can force them into, okay, let's say you're working, how would this work? Here's what you told me you think you want. Here's what you really want. And then you can make your decisions. But you have to basically design kind of like an alpha test scenario. And marketing we call it focus groups. We'll need
It's more than a focus group.
Yeah.
It's a simulated user
But
environment.
I think you're basically going to make a simulation, and you have to figure out, when am I going to lose money by this or wrong? When do I have to make a commitment? And that's the point when you do that.
I wanted to steer it back to the executive view because I think executives love agile development. Why? Because it seems to minimize the risk of getting it right for the customer in many ways, and you're not all the way invested in sometimes, which is probably why we've moved away from more cost reimbursable contracts. In either case, I think so. We like that, and I think there's a lot of benefits on all sides, and I think that's why it's taken off. But I would say I bet there's a few people in this room that have seen so-called agile development, which was nothing more than people not having any process at all, right? And so and I think we have to be a part of advising the goodness of it to the executive team so they make informed decisions about how to price something, or that we're driving it through the metrics, or and our estimating techniques are correct, because that's the key, or whether we're not following the process to the point before, and we're really in the Wild Wild West, and we're going to get ourselves in big trouble, right? Because because people aren't following the process that Bob said before, and you can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink, and all the training in the world doesn't necessarily. So to me, that's why audits are so important, right? If your audits are, that the executives got to be paying attention to the audits, and they got to know that what we said we were going to do, we're doing it, and I think that's part of the PMR IPR process. So, good. Other comments? Well, I really appreciate the time today. I hope it was a fun discussion, and there's a lot more. I'm sure we have a lot more fun together. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank you very much for putting up with me.
Paul, thank you very much for coming in and sharing the executive overview of a lot of things we needed to have called to our remembrance. The whole is equal to the sum of the parts, but what executives like to see is that little bit of something extra, whether you call it the Disney magic or the Apple magic, that builds customer satisfaction, because a satisfied customer is a happy customer, and we're all in the business of creating happy customers. In order to do that, we need data, particularly data-driven decision-making on accurate, verifiable data. We all know this. This is what the board of directors, this is what the C-suite of executives are looking for. So once again, Paul, thank you very, very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
While we are thanking people, big thanks to Webmaster Jeff Carnes for getting the email announcements up, keeping the web announcements, the web broadcast. This whole meeting has been recorded for those of you who would like to review it. Jeff will have that up before the end of the week. Very big thanks to Carolyn Miller for having another excellent dinner and venue. Our next dinner on July the 8th will be at PJ Skidoo's at the west end of the Beltway in Fairfax County. And one of the things that we're being recognized is our rotating venues to fit into workplaces and residences. So we hope to see you next month. And finally, a second very, very big thank you and appreciation to Bob Ziman for his many very high quality, good quality deliveries in whatever job he's done for the section. John Mullins can't be here because he's working for some taskmaster. John, thanks all of you for being here. He'll be running the meeting and he'll be in front of you next month. So again, thanks. It's good to see old friends like Arnold, and good to see Bruce. You getting us all started with Q&A. So always good to be here. Thank you.